Greetings to all and sundry. You're welcome to the JMA Connections this Saturday, the 25th day of April. The year is 2026. I am glad to be here again today for yet another moment of communion, another moment of communication, another moment of information, education, and sensitization, another moment of mobilization. I am delighted with the feedback that I'm getting from the ground regarding the last message that I put out here about the going-ons in Ndian County of the Southern Cameroons. I know that Mundemba is the headquarters of Ndian, because I got someone telling me that they felt that I did not understand that Mundemba is the headquarters. Of course, I've been to Mundemba. I know that Mundemba is the headquarters of Ndian. When I was talking of headquarters in that communication, I was talking of the headquarters of Pamol Plantations, PLC, that is in Lobe, because the headquarters of Pamol is in Lobe. So that said, like I pointed out, I like the feedback that is coming. I think a lot of people have been very disheartened at what they heard, particularly with the actions of the so-called Bayelsa boys in the area who were brought in by the members of the CPDM crime syndicate led by Chief Dr. Joseph John Gute, who is chief of Bogongo village and the prime minister head of government in La République du Cameroun, along with all of the others, including Meyeli Meboka, who is, I guess, a vice president at the National Assembly of La République du Cameroun. So I think that a vast majority of the people of the Southern Cameroons, and particularly those from Ndian County, have expressed disgust and are going to be pulling the strings to make sure that this illegal foreign militia being sponsored by Pamol Plantations at the behest of the members of the CPDM crime syndicate is dealt with. This is unacceptable, and I think our people deserve to be free. That said, I'd like to extend hearty regards to people in Santa local government area in Mezam County. I'm extending regards to the people there because I'm looking at something that happened there just, some 48 hours ago, about 2-3 days ago, where the people were going to, bury the remains of a loved one that had passed, that had died. And when they got to Matazam, the gendarmes in Santa, the colonial forces in Santa, decided that the people needed to settle them handsomely before they would be allowed to go and bury their loved one. This was horrible. It was a serious standoff. And when the people refused, because they did not understand the rationale of having to bribe an occupational force from Yaoundé in order to bury their loved one, they denied. They refused to give any money. In reaction, what did the gendarmes do? They shattered the casket. Did you ever hear that anywhere? I mean, they shattered the casket, which forced the people to all move en masse to the Brigade Santa to sit there and insist that the brigade commander and his assistant and all of those who carried out this horrible act must buy a new casket and replace it. This is exactly what we're talking about. You bring people who claim that they're coming to protect our civilians, and they come and they're treating us as a conquered people. This is what we've been talking about. This is exactly why this fight is very important. This is why this liberation movement makes all the sense in the world. Because we're not even free to bury our beloved ones. We're not even free to bury our deads. An occupational army is taxing us. Now there's something now that I understand is called a burial tax. This level of dehumanization, this level of thingification is unacceptable. It will not be accepted in La République du Cameroun. So it should not be accepted in our land. That's why these people need to be ejected from our land the fastest possible. That is why we have to continue the resistance as seriously as we are doing. And I really want to hail the civilian population, the civil society of the Southern Cameroons, because we are continuing to hold strong. Despite the proxies of La République du Cameroun on social media here and there, advancing to us all kinds of reasons imaginable for us to completely, let's abolish the ghost towns and tell La République du Cameroun that we are ready to continue to live as slaves, to continue to live in slavery and servitude after almost 10 years of resistance. This is exactly what that kind of message translates into. That said, my focus today is actually this whole noise that you are hearing again about a certain initiative, so-called, to convene another all-Anglophone conference. This is what we're going to be talking about today. And look, folks, I'm not just talking about it like some kind of ordinary talk that you say social media talk and all of those things that, oh, this person is pro-independence, so he has just come to oppose it. As usual, they never like to hear any of those things happen. No. I'm coming here for us to take a deep dive down into history. A very quick dive. We see the origins of this thing you called the All-Anglophone Conference. How did it come about? What were the resolutions taken at earlier conferences? How did we evolve? You know, it's important for us to do this because the first All-Anglophone Conference was held in 1993. I guess that was April 1993. And there are people today who are involved in this liberation movement who were born either that 1993 or after 1993 or just some 2 or 3 years before 1993 who didn't know actually whatever happened. Because you had this session 1993, 1994, and I guess not even 1995. So they need to understand this. And you know, it's also important to take a good dive down memory's lane so that even our people who might have forgotten will recall that there was a time where all these members of the CPDM crime syndicate who are fostering this serious divide and rule that La République du Cameroun wants to use in keeping us apart, that there was a time where they were all militantly, functionally, all working together like one block, like Southern Cameroonians that we are. It's important that people should know there was a time like that. That all the Elvis Ngoles that you see, the Mbelamoki Charles, all of those people, along with the Munzus, along with the Yangs and the Carlson Anyangwes, all of these people that you see, all of these people, all of them, that they worked together as one person. The Pamfongalam for all of these people, that they worked together as one person as Southern Cameroonians only, not as, oh, these people are the people we don't like, the other ones are the ones that we like, oh, they are Graphi, they are Southwest, or they are Northwest. No. I mean, 1993 operated as one people with one clear objective, and they all came to a resounding resolve, which resolve led to what is happening today. Because what is happening today is a direct consequence, a direct outcome of the AACs. And so when some people come and they want to pretend to want to make us to backtrack, it's important to take people to where we all started. That is why I took time off to do a succinct research and make sure that I come here and actually do a presentation that enables us to go back in time and then start coming gradually until we arrive at where we are today. And this will edify all of us and make it possible for us to better appreciate the gesticulations that we are seeing today. But this is important. So don't go away. I promise you we're not going to be long, because I made sure that we'll be concise and precise, and that will definitely be to the point. So I christened this discourse the All Anglophone Conferences, the birth of the SCNC, and the unfinished decolonization question of the Southern Cameroons. So the All Anglophone Conferences were historic political gatherings through which Southern Cameroonians attempted to move from complaint to collective constitutional action. The first major gathering, the AAC1, was held at Mount Mary Maternity Center in Boya from April 2 to April 3, 1993. Its stated purpose was to adopt a common, I will use Anglophone throughout here because that's what it was. So its stated purpose was to adopt a common Anglophone position on constitutional reform and address matters affecting the welfare, posterity, territory, and future of Anglophone Cameroon, as was called then. The conference saluted key conveners, and those key conveners including Sam Ekontang Elat, of blessed memory, Dr. Simon Munzo, Dr. Carlson Anyangwe, and Benjamin Etoy, and then Francis K. Wache, of blessed memory too, served as rapporteur. So AAC1 resolved that Anglophones will participate, or that Southern Cameroonians will participate in constitutional talks only through a single and indivisible Anglophone delegation. So they created a drafting committee for Anglophone constitutional proposals and established a 65-member Anglophone standing committee to follow up implementation and work out modalities for restoring Anglophone institutions. Hear that very well. For restoring Anglophone institutions. These were the political class at the time. The political class, a lot of these people are in the CPDM party today, are in Yaoundé, and are now operating from different wavelengths. Because you see, this show of unity is exactly what Yaoundé does not like. This show of unity and oneness is exactly what hurts Yaoundé. So when they made this clear that they will only participate in constitutional talks through a single and indivisible Anglophone delegation that was made up of what they call themselves to the Southwest and Northwest, that was because the people recognized the desire of Yaoundé to always divide and rule. And when Yaoundé saw this, they had one clear objective in mind: play for time. That's Paul Biya's game. Play for time. And while playing for time, make sure to create grievances, whether true or untrue, that are said to have existed between the people of the grass field and those of the forest zones of the Southern Cameroons. Divide them to a point where it gets to that dicey place where you will say these people cannot see each other eyeball to eyeball. And to do that, they brought people like Victor Julius Ngo, Professor Victor Julius Ngo. Of course, I'm sure everyone knows today that Professor Victor Julius Ngo is not a Southern Cameroonian. He is a Beti man from the Lekie division of the center region of La République du Cameroun. And so Victor Julius Ngo's role was basically to continue to infiltrate our ranks. Of course, he wrote a lot of history books on the history of the Southern Cameroons. He wrote a lot of books on the history of the Southern Cameroons, Julius Ngo. And you notice that in a lot of the lines, he laid emphasis on the fact that the people of the Northwest and the people of the Southwest can never see each other eyeball to eyeball. They don't ever like to work together. They don't ever like to live again together. They don't ever like to do anything together. But I'm telling you that in 1993, these same people met. These same politicians who often come across as being at each other's throat met and agreed that they will only participate in constitutional talks through a single and indivisible Anglophone delegation. That's when they use the word indivisible. I know that as I'm talking, they are watching me. I know. Those people are all watching me. Simon Moons, you are watching. Professor Elvis Ngole, you are watching. All of these people, all of you, Benjamin Ito, you are there, you are watching. All of those people, Bella Mokichas, A.K. Garinga, alias the people who don't like, you are watching. And you know that what you all are claiming today to be a divide and all whatnot was artificially manufactured by Yaoundé after they saw the danger in this show of union. Because you understand, this was 1993. Again in 1994, they met. In 1995, Yaoundé came up with a smart idea. Take off the citizen of La République du Cameroun, whom they used to call Odontol, Sadou Ayatou, as prime minister, and take away the position of Speaker of the Assembly from Southern Cameroonians, hand it to the Northerners, and they give the prime minister's office to Southern Cameroonians and use that particular office as a divide and rule tool. So they appointed Simon Achidiachu prime minister, and then behind started telling the other people, you see, when you are fighting all of those things and all whatnot, the people who benefit are the people from the Northwest, and you stay out in the cold. These are not things that are said from anywhere. No. Some of these officials, these CPDM officials, told me how they used to be called at the presidency in Yaoundé and were told how the people of the Northwest are doing everything to take everything away from them, and vice versa. If you recall, Titus Edzua, who was Paul Biya's Secretary General at the presidency and personal doctor, wrote in his book, The Biya Approach, a Divide and Rule. And he explained that Paul Biya divided even families, brothers, and that if he appointed you minister, and he saw one of your brothers from the same village working with you very well, they will do everything, and before you know it, that brother or sister is being received at the presidency and is being told that the current minister is doing everything to fight you because he fears that you can take his position. And then we'll call the minister and say, you know what, that your brother that you're working with very closely was here. He is doing everything to take your position. And sometimes in the end, says Titus Exua, they will actually kick you out and replace you with that same person. To do what? To further the divide. That is exactly what Paul Biya succeeded in doing with the system in the Southern Cameroons from the moment they saw this show of unity in 1993 to seriously divide the people of the Southern Cameroons. Do not forget, we as Southern Cameroonians never moved into La République du Cameroun as Northwest and Southwest. We moved in as Southern Cameroons and were named in that new dispensation the Federated State of West Cameroon. But Yaoundé came in to make sure they operated this specific administrative division along cultural lines for us, for the specific purpose of using it for divide and rule, because they told themselves, with advice from Paris, that that would be the only way to hold the people of the Southern Cameroons in servitude, in slavery and servitude forever. Because as long as we stay so seriously divided and are being used to fight each other, we will never be able to focus seriously on sending them out of our territory. And that's what it has been. Does the ping pong on the post of Prime Minister this time? Oh, it was Simon Achidi Achu. Hey, the people were announced. Finally, when Simon Achidi Achu moves, they bring in Peter Mafani Musonge. Now is the time of the Southwest. Oh, Peter Mafani Musonge, the xenophobe. He never missed the opportunity. That's the person that was used the most. Because as soon as he landed at the Prime Minister's office, he operated a purge. Anybody who was not from the South, especially from Fako, was purged. Those are the kind of things. I'm saying this so that you should understand how we got to where we are today. So you make no mistake. So the significance of AAC 1 was that it still operated within the framework of reforming Cameroon. Not yet outright separation. AAC 1 wasn't for separation yet, but he already created a stir. Why? Because Yaoundé had always known that the day will come where we will say, enough is enough and we have to go. Because they know the way they have been treating us. Because they know exactly what the agenda had been. And so they knew that there could be resistance. It's true, they never foresaw the kind of resistance they are facing now. So the central demand of AAC 1 was the restoration of a meaningful federal arrangement that will recognize the bicultural and historical identity of the Southern Cameroons. The resolutions were rooted in the belief that the 1961 federal spirit had been destroyed by centralization, especially after the 1972 unitary referendum. Of course, that was a constitutional coup d'etat and subsequent constitutional changes. So in that sense, AAC 1 advanced the emancipation quest by giving Southern Cameroonians a common platform, a constitutional language, and an institutional mechanism for collective action. It transformed scattered grievances into a structured political position. Note this. This frightened Yaoundé. An oppressor is never more frightened than anything more than the unity of the oppressed. Because when the oppressed become very united, start speaking the same language and looking at the same direction, the oppressor knows that danger is on the way. And so they have to do everything to make sure they reintroduce divide and rule. The second conference, AAC 2, was held in Bamenda from April 29 to May 1 and 2, 1994. You know, sources commonly cite April 29 to May 2, 1994, though the Bamenda Proclamation itself is dated May 1, 1994. So AAC 2 was convened because the Biya government had effectively suspended the constitutional reform process that was being negotiated through the tripartite conferences and failed to respond meaningfully to the federal proposals submitted from after AAC 1. So you see, right from where people are started saying, let's go back to the federal thing, let's go back to the federal thing. This thing that happened to it did not start today. The people had been feeling a lot of pain. The people have been undergoing a lot of psychological, moral, even physical torture in all forms. And the people had been talking. So this thing that happened in 2016 is not something that happened overnight. So the conference dissolved the earlier AAC structure and replaced it with an Anglophone council, which was given the mandate to pursue constitutional talks based on the draft federal constitution. And let me bring in an aside. Anyone who paid careful attention then, because 1993, I was in upper safe. I was in high school. So, I mean, I'm delighted that I had the opportunity to take time to chronicle a lot of these things, because I was really politically alert, even right from that moment. So, Joseph Owona, who was a professor at law, and who was sitting in that tripartite conference, threatened that if the people from the Southern Cameroons continued to insist on a return to the federal system, to the two-state federation, the Beti clan will secede and form its own country. He was talking of the Bulu Ekampeti that we know today. So this threat did not start today. He said if the people of the Southern Cameroons dare continue again talking about a return to the two-state federation, the Beti clan will secede. The Bulu Ekampeti is the center, south, and east. So most importantly, AAC2 declared that if the government persisted in refusing meaningful constitutional talks within a reasonable time frame, the Anglophone Council should proclaim the revival of the independence and sovereignty of the Southern Cameroons and take necessary measures to secure and preserve that sovereignty. Did you hear this? Because today, these same actors who held AAC 1, AAC 2, are today referring to us, the pro-independence movements, as misguided people. Whereas they laid the foundation and they decided this. You hear some of them come and sit and say there is no such thing as an Anglophone crisis. You hear some of them come and sit and tell you Cameroon is one and indivisible. Were they aware of this? When in 1994, in the Bamenda Proclamation, that grouped all of them, all of those so-called CPDM elite, not a single one of them was out of it. They were all there. They were all there. They are the ones who said this. Like I said, most importantly, AAC2 declared that if the government persisted in refusing meaningful constitutional talks within a reasonable time, the Anglophone Council should proclaim the revival of the independence and sovereignty of the Southern Cameroons and take necessary measures to secure and preserve that sovereignty. All of these members of the CPDM crime syndicate from across all of Southern Cameroons were there. I'm saying this is not a joke. My friend Professor Elvis Ngolengole, who constantly appears on CRTV, was there. He was even sitting, he was a member of that delegation, was sitting on the panels. They were all there. All of them who sit today and say, oh, Cameroon is one and indivisible, they were part of it all. They laid this foundation that we are working on. Dr. Munzu was there. He was even one of the conveners. Dr. Munzu was there. They were all there. They all knew there was a problem. They themselves all screamed there was a problem. And they themselves say, if within a reasonable time frame you don't resolve this problem, we will immediately do what? Revive the independence and sovereignty of the Southern Cameroons. Chief Dr. Joseph John Gute was there. Are you surprised, therefore, that when Chief Dr. Joseph John Gute got to Bamenda, some people say it was a Freudian sleep, it was a this and that, where he said the time has come to restore the sovereignty of our land, where he said the time has come to take back our sovereignty. No! That spirit was there because they were all there. They were all there. All of those politicians, they were there. And they know it. And they said this. And today, they are trying to play aloof. Today, they are trying to play the saint because they are so seriously ingrained in the BIA system and have gotten into paths that none of us know. So this was the decisive turning point. The AAC2 was a decisive turning point. AAC2 shifted the struggle from federal restoration to the conditional restoration of Southern Cameroon's sovereignty. That's what AAC2 did. It did not immediately declare independence, don't get me wrong, but it created the political logic for doing so, therefore declaring independence if Yaoundé refused meaningful negotiations. So the Bamenda Proclamation further stated that after such a revival of sovereignty, the Anglophone Council would transform itself into a Southern Cameroon's constituent assembly to draft and adopt a constitution for an independent Southern Cameroons. They all did it. We, their children, we picked up from where they had ended in the preparation of all this. The people of the Southern Cameroons read this. They were sensitized to this. While I was at ACN TV, we recalled these things over and over and over on Cameroon Calling. Anytime at the approach of May 20, we did programs that caused us to revisit all this. And sometimes, some of the people who participated in drafting these documents started living in denial. And that's why a lot of the time, after Cameroon Calling, we were in trouble. A lot of the time. I don't know if it's still Cameroon Calling today. I don't know what it has become today, because it lost its teeth a long time ago. So this meant that the Southern Cameroon's question was no longer merely a complaint about marginalization. It had become a sovereignty question way back in 1994 with AAC2. So the path from AAC2 led directly to the emergence of the Southern Cameroon's National Council. After Bamenda, many activists included that the term Anglophone, or many activists concluded that the term Anglophone was too loose as it described language rather than territory, history, or peoplehood. Did you hear this? Get it again clearly. Because I'd like you to see the evolution. We didn't create this evolution. We met it. Those actively fighting today did not create this evolution. We met it. So the path from AAC2 led directly to the emergence of the Southern Cameroon's National Council, the SCNC. This is because after Bamenda, many activists concluded that the term Anglophone was too loose as it described language rather than territory, history, or peoplehood. So the movement increasingly adopted the terminology of Southern Cameroons, linking the struggle to the former British Trust territory and its unresolved decolonization history. A Canadian Immigration and Refugee Board report, A Canadian Immigration and Refugee Board report notes that AAC was transformed into the Southern Cameroon's People's Conference. Did you hear that? AAC was transformed into the SCPC, that's the Southern Cameroon's People's Conference, while the Anglophone National Council became the Southern Cameroon's National Council, SCNC, as the elected governing body. So you see, this is not even me saying. This is a Canadian Immigration and Refugee Board. Why do I quote them? Because while I was doing research, I wanted to see what the external world is thinking about this. So the global community knows this transformation. They even know the names of some of these people who are today referring to the pro-independence movements as terrorists. They know that these people created the foundation on which we festered. They know it. That when they stand and shout, Cameroon is one and indivisible, they know that these people are no longer themselves. So you can easily say, get thee out of this man, Lucifer. Or get thee out of this man, Sangobinat and Paul Biya. This is what it is. You recall a young man telling my good friend Professor Elvis Ngole on Press Hour, said, Prof, stop supporting evil. Because they were just thinking in this light. These are the people who laid the foundation on which we festered. But today, they are claiming as if these ideas are falling from space. So, like I said, the Canadian Immigration and Refugee Board report notes that AAC was transformed into the Southern Cameroon's People's Conference, SCPC, while the Anglophone National Council became the Southern Cameroon's National Council, SCNC, as the elected governing body. Although other sources place the SCNC's rise around 1995 with Sam Ekontang Elad as an early chairman and described it as the body mandated to carry forward the sovereignty agenda after the AAC process. We adopted the SCNC. We didn't create it. Those members of the CPDM crime syndicate in Yaoundé created the SCNC in 1994. And when it came time to start fighting for senior political positions, they started looking at it as if it was vomit. But they created it. They created it. All of them. Not a single one of them was not there. They took part and they created it. So historically, therefore, the AAC process advanced the Southern Cameroon's emancipation quest in 3 stages. First, AAC 1 created unity of voice by gathering political actors, intellectuals, traditional authorities, professionals, and civil society around a common Anglophone constitutional demand. So you see, all those funds, those chiefs who stand and say, oh, these wicked children, but those chiefs were all there. Even this Fotabetando that fell like that and that just that recently people say Baobab, all of those are the hypocrites, all of them. They were all there. Benjamin Itoy, who is there making, they were all there. All of them were there. All those chiefs. Chief Atem Ebako, you were there too now. All of you were there. But today you stand on the other side and you look at those manning a same institution you created, following a mandate you gave. You call us terrorists. Because this is what it is. We should know this. And if you know this, it's very important. Because it will determine how you look at things. So you should understand that there was a time where all of these people spoke with one voice. Whether they were from Bamenda, whether they were from Ekona Lelu, whether they were from Ntenako, whether they were from Koto Barombi, whether they were from Talangai, they spoke the same language. Whether they were from Bakosi land, they were together. They were one. They spoke the same language. 1993, 1994, 1995. Before Biya succeeded in ripping them apart by doing exactly what Thomas Hobbes says, appealing to the selfish egos of each and every one of them. Biya told you that the last book he reads before he closes his eyes is Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince. So, he did his homework, played his game of chess properly, divided and ripped all of these people apart. And today, they are all operating like morons. I'm not insulting, I'm just describing, okay? So, let's say secondly, AAC2 created a sovereignty option by declaring that continued refusal by Yaoundé would justify the revival of Southern Cameroon's independence. And then third, the process produced the SCNC, which became the principal organized platform for non-violent Southern Cameroon's self-determination advocacy. That's why the motto of the SCNC has always remained the force of argument and not the argument of force. The force of argument and not the argument of force. Our people had opted for the peaceful approach, and that peaceful approach was pursued until when Yaoundé started killing our people rampantly, the people found themselves obligated to defend themselves. So one academic legal analysis summarizes this transition by noting that AAC2 essentially adopted the move from federalism towards outright independence if constitutional talks failed, and that the Anglophone Council was expected to proclaim the revival of Southern Cameroon's sovereignty under those conditions. It was clear. And La République du Cameroon did exactly what they do. Avoided this. The reasonable time frame passed. From 1993 to today is how many years? And so the critical question today is whether holding another all-Anglophone conference can resolve the current bloody pro-independence conflict without addressing the root cause, the unfinished decolonization of the Southern Cameroons. The honest answer, if you want me to be very honest, The honest answer is no. Not if such a conference is framed merely as another dialogue about decentralization, spatial status, elite accommodation, or cosmetic reforms within the existing state structure, like they did at their Grand National Monologue. And you heard Mesanga Nyamding even tell you that that Grand National Monologue or Grand National Dialogue that they called was actually meant, they actually wanted it to be only Southern Cameroonians, that they wanted La République du Cameroon, at the behest of Paul Biya, wanted to organize its own all-Anglophone conference supervised by itself, bringing us to talk among ourselves, and they give us resolutions to pass before their own people decided to torpedo it for money interests. You could hear that from Mesanga Nyamding. So the present conflict did not arise simply because Anglophones wanted better roads, more jobs, or administrative inclusion. It arose from a deeper historical grievance, the belief that Southern Cameroons entered a union whose legal terms were never properly completed, respected, or preserved. That's what it is. However, another conference could still be useful if it is radically different from past state-managed dialogues. Did you hear that? From past state-managed dialogues. It could help if it honestly revisits the historical record, addresses the absence or disputed status of a union treaty. You know, there was never a union treaty between La République du Cameroon and the Southern Cameroons. We have been singing this, say it on rooftops and all that. I'm reiterating it now. And at that conference to recognize that Southern Cameroons as a people with a distinct political history includes credible representatives from the ground, diaspora, civil society, traditional institutions, victims groups, and international mediators, and places all constitutional options on the table, including, if you like, federation, confederation, internationally supervised referendum, negotiated separation, or another mutually agreed settlement. Without that level of honesty, another all-Anglophone conference will risk becoming another ceremony of avoidance. Although it should be emphasized here that the vast majority of Southern Cameroonians today are determinedly focused on outright self-determination, or call it absolute independence. So the key message of this broadcast is this: AAC1 and AAC2 were not failures. Those conferences did not fail. They were warnings. AAC1 and AAC2 were not failures. They were warnings. They warned that if the Southern Cameroon's question was not resolved through meaningful constitutional dialogue, it will return as a sovereignty crisis. That crisis is now here. That sovereignty crisis is now here, and it is bloody. So another all-Anglophone conference today can only matter if it goes beyond symbolism and confronts the root cause directly: the incomplete decolonization and unresolved political status of the Southern Cameroons. Anything less may calm headlines, newspaper headlines temporarily, but it will not resolve the conflict. Let's be clear about that before people decide to waste their time or waste energy. So a contemporary proposal to reconvene an all-Anglophone conference inevitably raises the question of who is driving the process today and what constituencies do they represent. This also matters. Who is driving the process today? Who is championing the call today? And what constituencies do they represent? Two of the most visible figures associated with calls for a renewed conference are Nkongo Felix Agbobala and Simon Munzu. Both are respected for earlier roles in civil society and conflict mediation, and both have consistently argued for dialogue within a reformed Cameroonian framework rather than outright separation or outright self-determination for Southern Cameroons. You see where it breaks. That positioning places them within a reformist or union within Cameroon current, a current that has historically emphasized decentralization, federal restoration, or negotiated reforms. The difficulty is that the present conflict landscape is no longer defined primarily by reformist demands. It is shaped by a hardened, militarized environment and a population that, according to multiple readings on the ground, has moved significantly towards pro-independence sentiment. So these two represent a current that is against the current in the southern Cameroons. What credibility, therefore, do they carry along with them? This tension was already evident in the late Christian Cardinal Tumi's efforts to gauge public opinion. Cardinal Tumi's consultations and survey work in the conflict regions, often cited, of course, in public debates, indicated that a large majority of respondents favored outright independence as the preferred political outcome. While exact figures vary across reports and have been contested sometimes, but Christian Cardinal Tumi himself talked of 69% of the people saying outright independence. Or no, he used the term absolute independence. The direction of sentiment is, of course, unmistakable, even if you are contesting some of those figures. A decisive shift away from incremental reform towards a sovereignty-based solution. The people have said and continue to say no to incremental reform. What the people want today is a sovereignty-based solution. Tumi's own public posture evolved in response. He moved from advocating dialogue on reforms to endorsing an inclusive Anglophone General Conference with all options on the table, including independence. His attempt to convene such a forum in Bamenda in 2019 and even in Boya faced resistance from authorities in Yaoundé, with administrative obstacles and security concerns cited, an episode widely interpreted as evidence of the state's reluctance to host an open-ended conference that might legitimize sovereignty debate. Against this backdrop, therefore, a new AAC initiative fronted by actors identified with anti-independence or strictly reformist positions like Nkongo Felix Agbobala and Dr. Munzu risked a representation gap. If a substantial portion of the population, particularly those most affected by the conflict, now prioritize independence, a conference that narrows the agenda in advance, for example, by excluding independence as an option, is likely to be viewed as a predetermined and unreflective. It will simply be viewed as predetermined and unreflective of current realities. That's why I say the current is against the current. So in modern peace processes, credibility flows from inclusivity and mandate. Who is at the table? What options are admissible? And whether participants are seen as legitimate voices of their constituencies. Without that, even well-intentioned initiatives can be dismissed by key stakeholders, including diaspora networks, armed actors, victims groups, and youth constituencies, thereby completely crushing its impact. So for these reasons, many observers argue that reconvening an AAC in its traditional format or under leadership perceived to be out of step with prevailing grassroots preferences could amount to misallocation of time and political capital. That's what this whole thing is to me. Misallocation of time and political capital. A conference can still be useful, but only if it is reconstituted to match the present conflict phase, independently facilitated, internationally observed, broadly representative, including reformist and pro-independence voices, and explicitly open to all constitutional outcomes. Otherwise, the exercise risks repeating earlier patterns, producing statements without traction, while the conflict continues to exact a heavy human toll. So do not say tomorrow That AKUROH just came out to say, oh, holding an all-Anglophone conference nonsense. He's against peace. He doesn't want the return of peace. He doesn't want, he's talking justice, but doesn't want it and all of that. No. I've taken time off to do this research so that you and I go back down memory lane and walk our way back to exactly where we are today, so that you understand exactly where I am coming from when I say such a conference as they are claiming to convene will be an exercise in futility, because mostly it is a conference of positioning, political posturing, basically it. Aside of that, nothing to write home about. So let's not waste our time. Let's focus on what matters. We must continue to focus on the resistance. We must continue to fund our liberation movement, and we must continue to stay mobilized, united, and determined. So I want to end this broadcast here. It was slightly long today, but we really just had to do this. So I want to thank all of you who were part of this platform this day. And if this was your first time on the JMA Connections, I invite you to go right ahead and hit that subscribe button and make sure you personalize, so that anytime something new drops on this platform, you will be the first to know. Because usually when the news breaks, we meet here to make greater meaning out of it. And of course, do not forget to share the link, because traditional on this platform, we all share the link to the communication. We all share the links. We share as much as possible, because we want to reach as many people as possible to make sure everyone stays as informed, as mobilized, as sensitized, and as edified as possible. And so do not also forget to do one thing: drop a comment, be part of the conversation. This is a very important and sensitive issue. So be part of the constitution. Drop a comment, but please, no insults. Let's stay focused on the issue. If your comment tends rather to insult, I promise you one thing: I will delete it. And then do not also forget to hit that like button. It generally goes a long way. So thank you very much for your very kind attention. To God be the glory.